Friends, welcome to A Spirited Take. My name is Tom Dickelman, and I'm happy to be here with Sean Miller and Matt Duar from our church. And tonight we do something that we've never done before. You're in for a little experiment. I have asked Sean and Matt to each come to this taping with a question that they would like to pose. It could be any question under the sun, and to pose to our group. I also have one of those questions. And to see who goes first, I'm going to hold up either one or two fingers, and I'm going to let Ken Hall see it. And I don't think you can see this, Matt. So you pick either one or two, and then if you get the right number, then you go first. So what number do you pick?
1.
And the number was 2. So let's see, based on the rules, I think Sean
rigged.
goes first.
That was rigged.
It was rigged. Sean, so do you have a question? I trust you have a question for Matt and for me and for you to chew on for just a moment.
All right, is this the same question for both of you?
Yep.
All right. So the question is 2 parts. What advice would you give to your 30-year-old self? And what wisdom have you learned from your 30-year-old self? In other words, what would you tell your 30-year-old self to do differently? And what has your 30-year-old self taught you about life or yourself or wisdom or truth? Ready, set, go.
Yikes.
Thanks, Tom, for taking that first.
You know, my 30-year-old...
64 minus... Anyway, what?
Yeah, I was going to say, the first thing that comes to me is that...
Does Tom even remember when he was 30?
Yeah, it's hard to remember. That's what, 15 years ago? That's quite a while ago. And 30 years... Yeah, I was, a little bit into my ministry, and not too far away from moving to Lake Forest and Lake Bluff. And based on what I know now, what's that song? Oh, how I wish what I knew then and when I was younger. How's that? Like something like that.
I wish that I knew what I knew now. When I was younger.
Oh, okay, beautiful. That's the kind of
Thank you very
spirit
much.
of this question, I think.
Yeah.
And really simple. I would say go for it while you have the chance.
That's what your 30-year-old self taught you?
Well, I don't think I understood the question. I got thrown off when you started singing.
Tom,
Explain that question to me again so I get
Tom,
it right. Yes,
Tom,
Sean.
do you want extended time on this this particular
Tom
assessment?
requires more math.
I thought, what should I tell my 30? We got Ken Hall cackling in the
What
corner.
advice would you tell your 30-year-old self? And what did your 30-year-old self teach you about life? Or what is wisdom or what is true? Anyway, thanks for playing. Those
are two completely different questions.
That's why that was a 2-part question.
That's not part of the rules.
Oh my gosh.
I'll jump in since Tom is making this really
All
painful.
of a sudden, Tom's a rule follower, everybody. Ooh, it's not part of the rule.
Sean.
Thanks for joining us on A Spirited Take.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Matt.
Sean,
Yeah.
I would tell my 30-year-old self to just keep on keeping on.
Yeah.
and the what I learned from my 30-year-old self is that in all other previous iterations of myself is that at every moment in our lives we have acted completely consistently with what our capacity allows.
Mm.
And I think I wish I would have understood that earlier. and relaxed a little bit,
Yeah.
and tried not to force things so much. But we do the best we can do, and at every moment we're acting consistently with what we're able to do. And we're imperfect. We're in the process of becoming, and it's painful. It's messy, and sometimes it works out beautifully, and other times we crash and burn.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is that we let go, and we continue to allow ourselves to evolve.
Yeah.
This little other side. This banner above my whiteboard with the Chinese characters is a Chinese saying that says, "I fall down 7 times, I get up 8."
Mm.
And I have that
Nice.
there because I really appreciate that sentiment, that we're always in the process of falling on our faces, and that's okay. It can't be any other way. But we get up. We always get up, and we brush ourselves off, and we put one foot in front of the other, and keep on keeping on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to go with what Sean or with what Matt says. But actually, what you say, Matt, is perfectly in sync with the sort of Christian notion of the teachings of Christ that say there's no place for judgment.
Mm.
We're all operating within our own sort of capacity and realm. Yeah, nicely said. Thanks. Sean, what about you? You thought up that long 2-part question. You must have a fancy pants answer you want to share.
I would tell that guy to go easier on yourself. But honestly, what Matt said, I think, is really true for me, to also tell that guy you're doing your best. And I think about that guy who was 5 years into ordained ministry, and I had a lot of hope for the church, and I still want to have that same hope. And I think there's like a youthful hope that is really at the root of what hope should be. That like every day you're as hopeful as you were when you were in you may have a different kind of wisdom and a different kind of knowledge, but hope, like we talked about a few episodes ago, that guy was really hopeful, and I think that hope, that guy gave me a lot of hope from that 30-year-old me. But he needed to like take a deep breath, like relax. It's gonna be okay. Yeah.
Well said. Thank you. My I guess what I'd say, and it dovetails a little bit with you, Sean, is that I used to think far more back then organizationally and institutionally, and now I think far more individually. And I don't hold a lot of hope for the institutional church. I'm very hopeful and excited about our church as we sing our own song and go against the grain and kind of do our own thing. But I think that in my lifetime, at least, things are not going to change, and churches will continue to die. And the sort of hope that I had for my ministry and life has evolved so much. And right now, I think more in terms of individual ministry, sort of one at a time, to people, and trying to share God's love with them. So, any other thoughts on Sean's question, Matt?
Well, Tom, when you started, you said, back when I was 30, I used to think a lot. And I thought that was the end of the sentence, but you surprised me.
I would say
too easy.
I'd tell myself, if I'm 60, almost 65 years old, and I had a chance to speak to my 35-year-old self or 30-year-old self, I'd say, listen to your heart and go for it while you have a chance. And what I have learned in, almost 40 years of ministry is that we never know what tomorrow's going to bring. And we are blessed with just this day. and go for it while you have a chance, because you don't want to someday be at the end of your life kicking yourself in the fanny for all the things you never tried and never went for. And that's been my single greatest lesson of ministry. So, all right, gentlemen, thank you. Matt, I'm going to give you another chance to see if you go next, or if I do. If you get the, I'm holding up.
Well, I'll say one more thing, because
Okay.
you asked me if I had anything else to say to Sean's thing, and then you just kept talking. So,
Okay, thank you very much. No, sorry, go ahead.
no, but all kidding aside, I had this thought of reversing the question. If your 30-year-old self could meet your current self, what would it say? What would it tell you? What wisdom would it give you? Because we tend to think that wisdom is linear and accumulates in a linear way as we get older, but maybe there are things we've lost touch with that 30-year-old self was in touch with. Sean just alluded to that there was a lot of hope, there was a lot of positive energy, etc. So it'd be interesting if your younger, or any younger iteration of yourself, could see yourself now and be like, good job, or come on, get with it, or whatever. That would be also a useful way of kind of framing that reflection. But I'll let you go ahead and ask your question, because mine is so mind-blowing that it's likely, in Ghostbusters where they're like, don't cross the rays, otherwise it'll like rip a hole in the time-space continuum. When I ask my question, the technology might short out. So I'll let you go first.
Okay, then here's the question. I actually wrote it down. Let's see if I have it here. How do you handle a relationship with a business partner, or a customer, or a family member, or a dear friend? How do you handle that relationship these days when they are the polar opposite politically from where you are? And this person who's part of your family that you share meals with, et cetera, it's simply hard for you to fathom how they could have values that are so radically different than yours, and even to think about them makes you kind of seethe with anger. I can't tell you how many times I've had that conversation with people about being stressed out going to Thanksgiving dinner and wondering if they have to set ground rules, or what they do. So that's a question I have for both of you. Do you have any idea, any thoughts on how to address relationships with important people in our lives who are so radically, in a radically different place than we are politically?
There's a quote by a meditation teacher. I can't remember her name, but it goes something to the tune of, you can kick someone out of your home, but you can't kick someone out of your heart. And maybe that sheds some light on this, that sometimes you can tell someone, you know what, I need to get off the phone, or we need to end this conversation, it's not going anywhere productive, whatever. But you do so from a place where you always know that you regard and hold that person in your heart. But that doesn't mean you necessarily have to endure just, conversations that devolve into unskillful behaviors. So I don't know if that's a helpful answer or not.
What do you think, Sean?
Well, I mean, I think of times when, what does Jesus mean when he says, love your enemy? And you didn't use the word enemy, and we can parse if that's the right word. But, what does he mean by that? I think it's because that person is for some reason in our life to teach us something about ourselves. That's the way I think about it. this person who is making me incensed or angry or brittle or hostile or whatever, what do they have to teach me about the way I think about the world? I may think they are wrong in every sense of the word, but I think the times in which we live, the way I think about it, requires that I go the extra mile toward understanding at least a kernel of what they're saying and who they are. A kernel more than maybe I would have done at another time. And that is not, I'm not, and I agree with what Matt said, that's not to take abuse or violent speech or whatever, but I think day to day, across the dining room table, at the water cooler, on an email or whatever, I just think that times require a certain kind of action from people of faith that is different, that goes as close as we can get to that place where Jesus talks about loving people who would see the world completely different. He lifts up the faith of people like a tax collector and a Roman soldier over the disciples most of the time. So what's that about? I think that's about that they are there to teach us something that we're not always necessarily wanting to hear or even that we're ready for. So that's how I think about it. That's sort of like a parable answer to a parable kind of question, but that's how I would think about it.
Thank you. I don't have a great... Go ahead, Matt.
Sorry, go ahead. I
was just going to say that the piggyback on what Sean has said, I think is the only way that I know how to handle it is one, to avoid getting in conversations that I know are not going to go anywhere, and kind of have that own ground rule for myself. And the second thing is to try and understand the lens through which other people are living and understanding their political life. And what that often means is that someone who chooses to support someone that I want nothing to do with, the lens through which they view their life, which is basically their values, is often radically different. And that's just the choice that they make, and I need to accept that. And what makes all this so difficult, I think, is it's very rare for any of us to have a conversation, a political conversation, and when was the last time you ever had someone say, "Oh, you know what? You make a great point." People don't want to be... People aren't particularly open-minded these days. I think we have our minds made up, and we want to be heard, and that's that. It's just a very contentious, difficult time. So all I do is try and do the best I understand, try to understand someone else's lens through which they're viewing life, and do the very best I can to accept it, even when their values may be radically different than mine.
I think the other thing that happens now is that social media and email and the ways that we communicate almost make caricatures out of people and out of our arguments. So if I'm sitting across the table from somebody, and we just don't have those opportunities, obviously, because of COVID, but we have so many more ways to hide in our trenches that the odds are, in a conversation face-to-face about a difficult topic, there's something in the room, the spirit, the energy, the universe that makes it a little more likely to find some place of common ground, some kernel of something that you might agree on, versus an 11 o'clock email or a Facebook post that's just going to eviscerate any chance of common ground.
Final word, Matt. Go for it.
Jonathan Haidt, who wrote the book called The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Can't Agree on Religion and Politics, he's a social psychologist at NYU, and his work kind of just shows that when we talk about religion and politics, we think we're having a rational conversation, but all we're doing is rationalizing our emotional intuitions. So we just have these fundamental intuitions based on kind of innate personality traits that lead to perceiving the world and the events of the world in a particular kind of way. And as a result, then we rationalize out from those intuitions to prove why they make sense. And this is precisely why we never have moments where it's like, you go onto Yahoo or any major site that someone goes on, there's comments and people are just destroying each other. I mean, I don't think anyone's ever seen in a comment section someone say, oh, that's a really good point. I'll reconsider my position, right? Because that's not the conversation we're having. And I look at this from the perspective of an educator as well. And this really is bringing to light the issue of self-regulation. And so, like if I'm a teacher in a classroom and I see a student behaving in a way that I don't understand or I don't appreciate, the first thing I have to do is not take it personally and understand that the person is behaving in a particular way because they're attempting to self-regulate, that the conditions in their environment, whether they're external conditions or internal conditions, have fallen out of sync. And so the person's behavior is misguided behavior to attempt to bring attention to the fact that they're dysregulated. And so if we take that idea, and so hold on, before I get to that. So as a teacher, if I can take myself out of it personally and not think about the behavior from a punitive standpoint or whether it's right or wrong, but view the behavior as like dysregulation, regulation, I can think about what can I put on the table rather than take off the table in terms of helping this person. The thing is when we engage in these highly emotionally volatile conversations, we're immediately thinking, what can we take off the table? How can we punish the person? Can we say something nasty? Can we do whatever? But instead, when we take ourselves out of the picture and we think, how can I help regulate this person? We think about what can we put onto the table. So I can look at a student who's behaving in a particular way and not make it a punitive issue, but I can say, hey, I notice you seem really upset. Do you want to go get a drink of water? Do you want to go talk in the hall? Do you want, right? I can go through and try to list different circumstances and factors that might help them. So the reason I'm talking about this is because I think as a society, nothing is more dysregulating than a pandemic that isolates us. And the thing about human beings and mammals in general is the primary thing that helps us self-regulate when we're stressed is social connection. And we're living in a time and in a circumstance where the thing that most regulates us is viewed as the biggest threat to our health and well-being, which is being socially connected. And so I think people talk about politics and fixate on politics because in some way I think it helps them feel like they're venting about their dislike for the current situation as a whole. And I think when you can view it through that light, I have a particular person in my life who's just constantly just enamored with politics, and the only thing they can talk about is politics. There's nothing else going on in their life. But it's ultimately the way in which politics kind of dominates their life, to me, is really a sign of the fact that they're really struggling during this time. And so when I talk to them, instead of trying to go toe-to-toe politically, I can just say, yeah, I hear that you're really frustrated, right? Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. It's really hard. A lot of people are really feeling, whatever. And then the conversation just, like, the person just wants to be validated. And I think so many people just want to be validated. They don't want to, even though they're constantly getting into arguments, I don't think they actually want to be in arguments. I think they just want to be heard and validated. And I think when we can take ourselves out of it and just simply listen to someone, even if we don't agree, we can just agree with the fact that they feel the way they feel, right? Because that's self-evident that the person's upset. And just validate the fact that the person's upset. And I found with this one particular person in my life that then suddenly the conversation's kind of over. And it's like, all right, well, I'll talk to you later. And there's no, it doesn't spiral into this unending reactivity that never ends.
I'm sorry, Matt. Speaking of conversations being over, Sorry about that transition. I just want to be faithful to our time schedule. I know you've got a meatloaf in the oven, right?
Sorry.
No worries. I know everybody's sitting on the edge of their chair right now wanting to know what is the question that you have that's going to blow up the internet, or I can't remember how you said that.
Does one wear socks or no socks to bed?
No socks. I
don't know any question
I
that's
understand
more
that question.
charged than that question. We talk about politics all the time, dividing the world. The world is really divided by those who wear socks to bed and those who don't. And we got to know who stands on what side.
Well, let's just get right to it, Matt. Do you wear socks to bed?
I do not. I find them very suffocating and oppressive.
Sean, are you willing to disclose?
Not only do I not wear socks in bed, I also don't wear socks when I do a plunge in Lake Michigan, but I do know people in this community who do wear socks when they plunge in the ice-cold Lake Michigan, and I find it a bit odd, to say the least.
Sean, sorry, we're going to go on a tangent here because that's what I'm all about. I've seen you guys recently on Instagram, the LF plungers, taking your dives into Lake Michigan. I want you all to know
Oh my gosh.
that I have a chest freezer that I converted into a cold bath in my garage, and I keep it at 32 degrees and do regular ice baths in it. So if any of you ever want to come over and eat some ice cream in my chest freezer while soaking in water, feel free. Let me know.
I'm glad I'm not on Instagram to see what pictures or videos are up there, but anyway, it might be pretty ugly.
Oh, you guys scare me. And
So
you know
no
what we
socks.
should do, Sean or Matt, is you've shared with me how that experience sort of rewires your brain, and we don't have time for that today. But
Why not?
I
Let's
think
tackle it.
What's that?
I said, why not? Let's tackle it.
I'm totally hooked. I am totally hooked.
It's maybe we'll tackle that in an upcoming A Spirited Take. It's appropriate, I think, for me to just come clean and say no socks for me in bed, for what that's worth. Great question, and we really appreciate Sean Miller, who is the minister of the community church. Dr. Matt Duar, who is part of our team that does weekly wellness every other Monday night. If you're interested in that, you can contact us at the church office. That's on Zoom, and the sorts of things that we talk about here are sometimes a fit for what Matt and the people who enjoy that on Monday nights tackle. So that's Weekly Wellness with Matt Duar. And the final question I have is seated off in the corner is Ken Hall. Ken, thanks very much. And do you wear socks to bed? It's a no. We're 0 for 4 on whether we wear socks to bed. If you have any comments on that, send them to Sean at thecommunitychurch.us. Thank you for joining us on A Spirited Take. And we hope you'll give us a chance and that you'll come back next time. Have a great one.